Hey all, Michelle Raza here with the Finding Yourself Book Club. Today we're going to talk about Lindsay Gibson's Recovering from Emotionally Immature Parents. Last time we left off, if I can find my little... We left off on the exercise preparing yourself for the next time that an EIP gives you some type of unreasonable request. Basically trying to understand what you will accept and what you won't accept and planning beforehand so that when it comes at you, you can be prepared. Please do like and subscribe. It really does help us little YouTubers. And check out our website. We're at www.findingyourselfsatx.com. There you can fill out our free life balance questionnaire and send it to us for your first free consult. You can also just fill out a contact form and we'll be in touch. There's no obligation after your first consult, so you can just take advantage of that without fearing that we're going to be pressuring you or anything like that. And so without further ado, we will continue on in this chapter. Love spending time with you guys. I love all of your comments, so keep it up and thanks for interacting with me. Important exceptions to refusing a request. We're not always as strong as we want to be, so sometimes you might go ahead and give in because you are too worn down or bewildered to do otherwise. That's okay. Just notice how it feels to be taken over and make a note for the future. Other times, situations feel too serious to just say no, and you might end up helping because the risks of not acting seem too high. You might decide to help when a life is at risk. A life at risk is a good exception to make when agreeing to help. For instance, one man decided to pay for a cheap motel room for his irascible, homeless, and addicted brother during the winter because his brother had been admitted to the hospital with hypothermia. His brother was impossible to deal with, but he didn't want the man to freeze to death either. Another challenging situation might be when people talk about committing suicide. Is it distortion, panic, or the real thing? When the stakes are that high, you should act to save their life by calling the police or other professionals to intervene. They will then know that if they ever call you again in such a situation, you'll protect them by calling the police to keep them safe. Suicide threats are the most chilling form of emotional takeover. You cannot allow yourself to get cast in the role of the only person who can save their life through your efforts alone. Suicide threats should be treated like hostage situations where someone could really get hurt. You wouldn't try to deal with it yourself. You would call in law enforcement specialists. Now, all of this is really, that's really serious, and I don't know if you've ever been faced with that situation. I've had the case where someone is just like, stay on the phone with me, stay on the phone, stay on the phone. You have to go with your gut, and you have to do what you feel is best for you and for your family. But if somebody makes it a habit of, I think what she's trying to tell us here is if somebody makes it a habit of kind of holding you hostage, right? With their suicide threats, they're holding you hostage. You just need to take their threat very seriously. And that's why she's advocating calling for the police, because if they're just doing it for the sake of attention, if they have no intention of following through, and they're doing it to control you, that's how you show that you're taking them very seriously. I feel like this is much easier said than done. And if you're in that situation, it would be very, very hard to want to make that call. I think here is where we have to trust that Lindsay's a professional. Dr. Gibson is a professional and has dealt with this situation multiple times. But if I was in the place of the person being faced with this emotional takeover, I might have to go through the cycle a few times before I could get up the nerve to call the police. And if that's what's happening to you, don't be hard on yourself. You didn't get to this place where you are today overnight, and you're not going to get out of this place where you are overnight. So the first step is even being able to realize what's happening. And as you start seeing it, then you can do more to try and stop the cycle, to make things better, etc., etc. But it's not going to change overnight. So just keep listening, pick up the book, read the book, do the exercises, grab your journal. Slowly but surely, you will be able to resist emotional takeovers a little bit more. You might have an innocent third party consider. Sometimes you may choose to go along with an EIP's demands because of an innocent third party. After looking at the situation carefully, you might discover you want the same thing they want, but perhaps for different reasons. For instance, Stan's adult daughter, Layla, had begged money from him numerous times and spent it irresponsibly. However, Stan agreed to help her buy a newer car with airbags for the safety of his 10-year-old grandson. Why you become vulnerable to emotional takeovers. We can be reluctant to set limits because EIPs stir up emotions that get us to do what they want. You might give in to an emotional takeover because you'll feel bad about yourself for saying no. You are afraid of their anger. You fear being judged and punished. Let's look at each one of these fears and what to do about it in order to preserve your emotional autonomy when EIPs put on the pressure. 1. You feel bad about yourself for saying no. If normal standing up for yourself feels selfish, your self-esteem is probably being held hostage by an EIP. With EIPs, you can't say no to a request and still be seen as caring. Only in the distorted world of the EIP could thinking things over or setting a limit be construed as mean or uncaring. But their hurt reaction can be quite effective because no one wants to be a villain and no decent person likes to be seen as uncaring. You're afraid of their anger. You may also allow emotional takeovers because you fear the EIP's temper. They make us nervous with their emotional reactivity, much like people tiptoe around a sleeping baby or hesitate to say no to a volcanic toddler. Very controlling or narcissistic EIPs can get enraged if you don't conform to their wishes. The EIP may not act it out in physically harmful ways, or they might, but you will feel the anger radiating off them like a furnace. You feel like they might explode any minute. You fear being judged and punished. When you incur an EIP's judgment, it's sometimes hard to figure out exactly what was so bad about what you did. They act appalled, but you don't see how what you did was so horrible. Remember that EIPs think in emotional absolutes, which means that if you aren't completely on their side, they may see you as the enemy. The good thing about judgment is that you have to agree with it in order to feel bad. They may judge you, but you alone determine whether you feel guilty or not. You can step out of any EIP's distorted judgments as soon as you feel free to disagree with their opinions. You can decline to accept their criticism and make a distinction between what they're saying about you and what you know to be true about yourself. Remember, just because an EIP feels something to be true doesn't necessarily mean it is. You get to define yourself, not them. Decline their judgment if you don't think it's fair. The disassociation reaction. Why you can't think of a thing to say. Let's shift gears now and look at how a loss of connection with your own feelings facilitates emotional takeovers by EIPs. Dissociation. I'm saying it wrong. Dissociation is when you psychologically separate from yourself. It can make you freeze up or shrivel inside, or even make you feel like you're detached from your body. Most people have heard about dissociation only from dramatic stories about people with multiple personalities, But dissociation is a natural defense and can be any form of distancing from your conscious experience of yourself. It's a primitive type of emotional escape and a very common psychological defense against threat or danger, especially for children in an unsafe environment. Think of it as an automatic shutdown valve. It doesn't fix what's wrong, but it stops you from being emotionally overwhelmed by it. Dissociating or separating from your self-connection makes you passive and lets you get sucked up into an EIP's emotional takeover. Unfortunately, this self-disconnection can become so automatic that you might not know when you are sliding into it. Why it's so important not to disconnect with yourself. Hold on, I'm going to go back. The disconnection state and its roots. Slipping into a dissociated, disconnected state is one of the ways we instinctively cope with imminent danger. It's related to the play dead or freeze response in animals that occurs when they realize a predator is too close for escape. You might have personally experienced dissociation as a stunned feeling, a kind of trance-like state accompanied by a feeling of blankness and loss of initiative. You can't think of what to say or do. Everyone is familiar with this shutdown state. We call it the deer in the headlights reaction. Dissociation saves us from overwhelming levels of traumatic pain, injury, and loss. Sometimes it's a blessing to step away from yourself and feel nothing. Hold on, I need to review 1 second. Okay. People who overuse intoxicants induce dissociated states in an artificial way, setting aside their ordinary consciousness to not be aware of their feelings. This same dissociative mechanism can cause you to go blank and let an EIP emotionally control you. When you can't think of what to say in response to a hurtful remark or an unreasonable demand, dissociation may be happening on a small scale. You're in a little state of shock and you can't think. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to go through this and see what I should say, what I shouldn't say. Trying not to just read the entire chapter, so it does get a little hard here. Why it's so important not to disconnect from yourself. Once you shift into self-disconnection, you can no longer make choices in a situation. Therefore, learning to recognize and prevent dissociation is crucial. The steps in preventing dissociation are to 1. Stay in touch with yourself no matter what. 2. Snap out of it when you start to zone out. 3. Keep thinking of active ways to deal with the situation. So I think one of the things that she said that is really important for us to consider is people who overuse intoxicants induce dissociated states in an artificial way. So I've known a lot of people who run away from their feelings either by grabbing alcohol or another substance. I think that it's very, very common to do this. I don't think you have to be an alcoholic to drown your sorrows on a Friday or Saturday night. I think a lot of people do that. And so I mean, some of this is difficult, right? Because she's saying, stay in touch with yourself no matter what. Snap out of it when you start to zone out. Keep thinking of active ways to deal with the situation. Okay, Dr. Gibson, awesome, easy to write it down. But how do we actually do this? I mean, have you ever been so stressed out, like after a day of work where you message your coworker and you're like, oh my God, girl, I need a drink, right? You're looking to disconnect for just a little bit from reality and to lower your stress levels. So I think some level of that is healthy. The balance would be when you don't ever deal with your problems. So here what she's trying to tell us is advocate So advocating for yourself and not letting yourself being taken over by an EIP. And so if you're constantly in a dissociated state, you're an easy target because you're not with it. You're not going to say, this doesn't feel right. This isn't good. You first off can't even trust your gut. You don't know what your gut is, right? And so she's advocating for us to be more present and mindful. But mindfulness is a practice all in its own and is very difficult to achieve. You can find all kinds of apps for meditation, doing, yoga, meditation, all of that stuff. And it sounds so it's so out there, right? But it's actually not. And it's practices that have really helped people. It's like when you meditate, you calm your mind to where you don't need to you are kind of dissociating because you're observing your thoughts as opposed to being in your thoughts. But it allows you to kind of refresh and reset and not necessarily have to go, grab the bottle every day or whatever it is that you do in order to reduce your stress levels. But I just feel like listening to this, as you're listening to me talk and read Lindsay's works, it's not so easy, right? She's telling us to do these things, but it's not so easy. And so in order to achieve a state where you could calm yourself without any sort of outside substance, or for example, even waking up without a cup of coffee or something, it's not so easy. So don't be so hard on yourself if you can't do it right away. And also think about looking into some mindfulness practices which can help you. I think the Calm app is out there. That one may be a little pricey. There's an app called Unwinding Anxiety, Dr. Judson Brewer's program. That one's really good. It's also quite expensive. It's like $30 a month or something like $200 a year if you get the yearly subscription, $150 if you do the 6-month. But that one's really good. Tons of free stuff on YouTube for meditation. I think just learning to be able to sit with your feelings, identify your feelings, journal your feelings. I think it's very, very, very challenging. And just speaking from the heart, my own journey, when I was starting on the path of all of this self-help and coaching and all of that, I needed a feelings wheel to even be able to identify what my feelings were and put them into words. I was very disconnected, very compartmentalized. And so you can Google that. You can Google a feelings wheel to try and put words to how you feel, especially if you're angry and you just want to smash something. Typically anger is one of those feelings that is covering a more vulnerable emotion like fear, loss, anxiety. So yeah, all of this is really good and really important. I don't want you to think that it's easy because it's really not. It's not easy. So I'll just finish off with the highlights to remember out of this chapter. Highlights to remember. In this chapter, we looked at how to spot and resist tactics used by EIPs for emotional takeovers. You learned about EIP's distortion fields and how they use their sense of urgency as entitlement to your help. You now can claim your right to take time to think your way through situations when you feel pressured to do more than you want to. You can now recognize an EIP's exaggerations and consciously and actively refuse any request that makes you uncomfortable. You also hopefully realize how an EIP's intimidating pressure, anger, and judgments can disconnect you from yourself to the point of dissociation. You learned about the importance of taking charge and acting on your own behalf in any situation that might threaten to separate you from yourself. So heavy stuff in this chapter. I do recommend you pick up your own copy and read it. The exercises are in there as well. Next time that we talk about this, we will start going over chapter 5, skills to manage interactions and evade coercions. Please do like and subscribe. It really does help us little YouTubers. And check out our website. We're at www.findingyourselfsatx.com. I really do love all of your comments and I respond to them. So please, if you're watching this video, just send me a comment to let me know that you're there. I really do appreciate all of that. And I hope that this is helping you and teaching you something. I was really grateful that Dr. Gibson wrote to me. Hopefully, Dr. Gibson, if you're watching, I'm conveying your message in a good way. But yeah, happy to be here with you guys. It's a beautiful day over here in San Antonio today. I don't know if it's getting cool wherever you are. Here in Texas, it's hot until it's like 2 weeks of winter, except for Winter Storm Uri. That was a whole craziness back in February. So, all right, y'all take care. We'll talk soon and have a good one. Bye.